"30-year-old Dr. Peter Newmans is a sex therapist living in LA. Although Peter's profession revolves around he has never had any urge in his entire life. Peter has even written a book about rechanneling one's sexual energy to do something more productive. In the opening scene, he is in a therapy session with a patient. He gives her his book as a means to help her with her problems. Peter's also planning to write another book, but is experiencing writer's block at the moment. His next-door neighbor, Josh, is a teenager who often asks him for dating advice. Although Peter never experienced the typical teenage life, he tries his best to help the kid. Rich and Luke are Peter's childhood friends who are worried about his strange lifestyle. They try to set him up with women, but Peter never seems to be interested in dating. Luke recently broke up with his girlfriend and is on dating sites looking for casual hookups. Meanwhile, Rich is married with 2 kids. They start to believe that Peter is gay until he shows interest in his next-door neighbor, Michelle. She is a kind-hearted woman who has a passion for cooking. However, she is dating a workaholic named Charlie. He hardly pays attention to her and is always working. Peter understands this and sympathizes with her. On the weekend, he goes to his parents' house. Mr. and Mrs. Newmans know that their son is not normal. He never acted like a normal teenager and has never had a girlfriend, but they do not know what is wrong with him and have no way to help. The next day at work, Peter's boss tells him that he has been selected to do a NED talk in front of hundreds of people. He will get to talk about his book, which she thinks will increase its sales exponentially. Not just that, but Peter is also invited by a radio show host for an interview. He returns home to see Michelle kicking Charlie out of her house. After the guy leaves, Peter goes to console her. Michelle appreciates him being there for her and offers him a glass of wine. They are drinking and talking about the breakup when she unexpectedly kisses him. Right then, Peter gets an intense headache and has to retreat. He has been getting a few really bad migraines that are getting worse with time. He apologizes to her and returns to his apartment immediately. The following morning, his friends wake him up for a basketball game. Before they leave, Michelle knocks on his door to apologize for what happened yesterday. He forgives her, and the two hug. Rich and Luke are disappointed in him for not making a move when Michelle was vulnerable, but Peter thinks that that would have been wrong. As usual, the friends walk to a basketball court and go against some guys from the neighborhood. While the other guys curse at their opponents, Peter is oddly calm, even while being yelled at. The game starts and suddenly, the ball hits him in the crotch. He is rushed to the hospital where doctors do MRI and CT scans to check if he has hurt his head during the fall. When the results arrive, they find out he has a long-term harmless brain tumor pressed against his pituitary gland. This has caused a female hormone called prolactin to be released into his system, and the testosterone production has been suppressed. The doctor claims that 30-year-old Peter never transitioned into puberty. This explains his lack of body hair, underdeveloped testicles, and his lack of desire. Peter is beyond excited to find out that he is normal when he had been worried that he had some serious medical issue his entire life. The tumor on his brain is small and can be removed through his nose with a simple procedure. At night, Peter video calls his friends and tells them about his condition. They are surprised that he's never even had an erection and doesn't have a single body hair. When asked why he hid this for all these years, Peter claims that he just wanted to be normal like everyone else. After the procedure, the doctors tell him that it will take a few weeks before he starts noticing changes in his body. He also warns them of the factors of hitting puberty, like mood swings, acne, body hair, and so on. During the recovery, Peter stays at his parents' home so they can take care of him. When he is able to walk, he goes to the bathroom with the Playboy magazine. But even after skimming through all the pages, he doesn't feel anything. One day, his friends come to visit him with a stripper, who is supposed to help him get enough. She dances for him while his friends eagerly wait outside. However, by the end of the session, Peter is giving her life advice as a therapist. Everyone is worried because he is showing little to no progress until one morning, he wakes up with an His parents jump in happiness now that their son is finally normal. He returns to his apartment that day to see that Luke has come over with his Tinder date. After they leave, Peter for the first time in his life. Starting that day, he gets addicted to it. He recognizes that it is a problem but cannot do anything about it. His friends are of no help because they also claim to have been the same way when they first hit puberty. One day, Michelle meets Peter in the hallway and tells him that she is going to Santa Barbara for a week to join a cooking class hosted by a famous chef. Peter wishes her luck but refuses to hug her. Michelle considers it weird but doesn't think much of it. Peter decides not to tell her about the tumor because he doesn't want her to think of him as a freak. When he returns to work after recovering, he can hardly focus on his clients' problems. Them talking about their life turns him on, no matter what he does to suppress his feelings. With time, working gets more and more difficult for him. Then, he is introduced to another problem faced by pubescents: acne. He goes to the doctor and asks for a solution, but the doctor simply claims that there is no puberty-reversing pill. The day before Michelle leaves for the cooking program, she comes to visit him. Peter's place, which used to be clean and tidy most of the time, is now filled with trash. It seems unusual to Michelle, so she asks him if he is all right. Peter promises to tell her everything when she returns from Santa Barbara. A few days later, he is with Josh playing video games when he gets a call from her. She tells him that she is doing great and boasts about the chef who is delightful to her. Peter experiences jealousy for the first time and doesn't know what to think of it. He also gets irritated pretty soon and cuts the phone call without letting her finish. Josh knows exactly what he is going through and sympathizes with him. The following day, Peter goes to the radio show where he is invited to talk about his book. In the beginning, everything goes as planned. However, his voice cracks in the middle of the interview. The interviewer offers him some water and continues asking him questions, but Peter doesn't seem to be in control of his voice. He starts to get frustrated and yells at her. After a disastrous interview, he returns home humiliated. His mood swings get worse and he lashes out at his parents as well. Mr. and Mrs. Newmans are in shock, but they understand that he is finally behaving like a rebellious teenager. At night, Michelle calls him to give him updates about her life. She also mentions that she is at the chef's house along with the other contestants. From the background, the chef flirts with her, making Peter even more jealous. He rudely implies that she is sleeping with the chef and ends the call after asking her to stay away. The next day, he and his friends go to play basketball. Rich is going out to a hotel with his wife for their anniversary and wants Peter to babysit. He is reluctant, but he agrees to do it anyway. Then, on the court, Peter, who used to be calm and composed, loses his temper on being insulted. He plays aggressively and gets into an argument with his opponents. When things get heated, his friends have to ask him to back off. Later, Peter and Josh go out for dinner and talk about girls. Peter relates to the kid way more than he does to his friends. On being asked about Michelle, he claims he is way too possessive towards her. Josh assumes that Michelle has a fairly high body count and asks Peter to practice having sex before he meets her. Peter takes his suggestion into consideration and gets on several dating sites. Soon he gets addicted to them and meets many girls through it. The first few dates do not go as planned, but soon he gets the hang of it. One day on returning home, he sees Charlie in front of Michelle's door. He leaves a bouquet of flowers in front of her door and asks Peter to tell her that he misses her. When she returns the next day, she assumes that Peter was the one who brought the flowers. He doesn't deny it and apologizes for being rude to her on the phone. Following that, he invites her to dinner to talk more about her trip. While he is getting ready for it, he gets a call from Rich, reminding him that he has to babysit the kids for the night. Peter claims that he forgot about it, but refuses to cancel his plans with Michelle. Rich begs for him to be a good friend this one time, but he still doesn't oblige. The two get into a massive argument. Before Peter leaves for dinner, Josh advises him not to be a nice guy because girls like some edge. Peter takes the advice seriously and acts like a douchebag the entire time he is with Michelle. She tries to tell him about her trip, but he dismisses her and calls her names for sleeping with the chef. Michelle is left speechless at the comment. Just then, Rich and his wife arrive at the restaurant and accuse him of stealing their reservation. An agitated Peter challenges Rich to a fight, creating a scene in front of everyone. Having had enough with him, Michelle storms out. Peter tries to explain everything to her, but she refuses to listen, having found that the flowers were actually from Charlie. The next day at work, Peter's boss walks into his office to see him and a patient getting undressed. She stops him immediately and calls him into her office. He is asked to stay at home until the clinic makes sure that the woman won't sue them. The boss is disappointed in him because he was one of her best pupils. Seeing his life go downhill, Peter goes to talk to his father. They have a heart-to-heart chat about everything happening in his life, and he feels much better after it. A few days later, Peter goes to the Ned Talk that he was invited to. While talking about his book and its principles, he realizes that he isn't entirely right about desire and their impact on a person's life. In contrast to what his former book mentions, he tells the audience that a person should have as much consensual as possible without the fear of being shamed by society. Everyone loves his speech, surprising his boss, who is bound to take him back. Later, Peter goes to Michelle's newly opened restaurant and apologizes to her, even though she is with Charlie. At first, she dismisses him and asks him to go away. But then he tells her everything about his tumor and him hitting puberty recently. After finding out the truth, she forgives him and breaks up with Charlie. In the last scene, we see that Michelle is pregnant with Peter's child. He is in a book signing event for his new book that he wrote for teenagers on how to become a real man.